Well, it is an honor for me to be here again today. This is the second time that I find myself in this place talking about immigration. The first time that I was here was about 2.5 years ago. And so I was asked to come back again under the assumption that maybe you haven't heard about immigration enough in the daily news. So I want to thank Bill Thorndike for asking me to present, and also President Jean for allowing me the opportunity. So again, the first time that I publicly shared my story was about 2.5 years ago here in the same room. Now, as you can imagine, that was a very hard, and some of you were here. I definitely recall choking up, and I even saw a few teary eyes out there in the audience. It was a very emotional topic for me to talk about, and hard, difficult, especially not knowing just how the audience was going to respond, but understanding that I was, in my home club, and that maybe there would be some sympathy. So your support that day, 2.5 years ago, the support that you gave me really gave me a lot of inspiration to continue. So following that presentation 2.5 years ago, I went out and presented at other Rotary clubs in the Valley and presented at other venues. And I really do mean it when I say thank you for the support. So why am I doing this, you might ask? Why am I getting involved in such a controversial topic? Let me tell you why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because the story I hear over and over about immigrants is my story, and it's not a positive one. I'm doing this because if I don't tell my story, someone else will continue to tell their version of it. And I'm doing this because I cannot just sit and watch this issue mushroom into an issue of race and division that is hurting people and also hurting our community and our country. So the suggestion that illegal immigrants are murderers, rapists, and drug dealers, and don't pay taxes, and are leeches of society is not a description that fits my story or that of others. I believe that this dehumanizing and criminalizing rhetoric is an attack on my own dignity and on my own humanity. And I just cannot stay quiet. This is something that took me years to get the courage to talk about and to get involved in. Now, I don't want to bore you with statistics, so I will keep it to just a few. I want to share a few statistics with you that counter some of these ideas. The first has to do with a suggestion that immigrants don't pay taxes. For the 50 years ending in 2003, the Social Security Administration accumulated about 255 million mismatched wage reports, representing about 520 billion in wages and about 75 billion in employment taxes paid into the Social Security Fund. Undocumented workers, of course, are not eligible for Social Security or unemployment benefits, despite the fact that they pay into the system. In 2010, at the peak of the recession, when many immigrants were returning to their home countries because of unemployment, undocumented immigrants paid that year 13 billion in Social Security taxes and received 1 billion in benefits. The second statistic I want to share with you has to do with the criminalization of undocumented immigrants. The fact is that undocumented residents commit fewer crimes in all categories as compared to native-born citizens. Native-born citizens in 2015 in Texas committed roughly 1,700 crimes per 100,000 people. The number of undocumented residents committed 700 crimes per 100,000. And the third and last statistic I want to share with you has to do with the cost of our ineffective border security and enforcement system. The U.S. spends over $5 billion on border security annually. There's a staff of roughly 20,000 people, an increase of 500% since 2001, and growing every year. Most of all, this money is spent on the southern border between the U.S. and Mexico. Last year, alone, $17 billion was appropriated to border security. Now, the flow of undocumented immigration is not the result of poor border security. I think many of us know that. It is simply a function of demand and supply. This is the result of demand for undocumented labor in this country. And as long as people can find employment, they will come. I am not suggesting that we open the borders and have a free-for-all. I believe in law, I believe in order, and I also believe in a secure border. And yes, there are many who come to escape death, persecution from their own governments and from gangs, and there should be a fair and just process for handling those cases. But I believe the majority come because there are jobs waiting for them. My question is, would it make more sense to address the issue at the root of the problem than at the border? Would it make more sense to have tough enforcement with employers of undocumented workers? Why do we criminalize the workers while employers are not held accountable? Why is this not at the top of the discussion? Now, before I go into the documentary, I would like to briefly summarize my story. I came to the U.S. at the age of 14, fleeing from a war in the 1980s that devastated my native country of El Salvador. My father, brother, and I traveled by bus, train, and foot through Guatemala and Mexico with not much more than the clothes on our backs. Finally crossing the Tijuana border with the three of us and another refugee stuffed in the trunk of a car. Now, I'm a father, and I suspect most of you have children too. And I think we can all agree that no parent would want to put their children in danger and hardship unless there's no alternative. Now, many immigrants arrive here without a place to go to. I was fortunate to have the support of my oldest sister, Irma, who had been living in the U.S. for a few years before we came. She not only went to El Salvador to get us out of danger, but also provided a home and gave me the opportunity to go to school and build a foundation so that I could build a life in the U.S. If it wasn't for her, I would not be here today. Like most immigrants, I came here with big dreams at 14 years old. And I came with a dream of getting an education, improving my life, and becoming a contributing member of society. My dreams were real, but at times also elusive as an undocumented immigrant. After high school, I attended San Bernardino Community College and was told I could not continue because I was undocumented. I was what today we refer to as dreamers. I was a dreamer, only without the DACA protection. I worked nights to support myself and pay for books and tuition. I was not asking for any financial assistance. I was only asking for the opportunity to get an education. Having the rug pulled out from under me at that time made me question the future, made me question the promise that I thought existed in this country, but I continued moving forward. And determined to succeed, 7 years later, I came to Southern Oregon with $5,000 in the bank and the dream of building a career in real estate. And that, in real estate sales, and that is how I started my real estate career, which has evolved into development and construction today. So that said, I am forever grateful to my sister, to our country, and to this community, which has always embraced me as one of its own. And I'm really grateful for that. I truly am proud to call myself a U.S. citizen and a member of this community. And now I would like to share with you a little bit about the documentary. So again, why am I doing this documentary? The film is intended to educate, to humanize the issue, inspire others to tell their story, and hopefully move the mainstream public to demand meaningful solutions from our Congress. I know this is a big dream to have, but I'm a dreamer, and I believe that anything is possible. The film will be narrative based on my story and the story of others. I'm not going after any specific political party or politician. So 2.5 months ago, we started filming in El Salvador, where we captured much of the culture, the history, as it relates to the war that forced us out. We also captured the culture in my native town, where I grew up as a child. We interviewed relatives that saw me grow up, immigrants that, and relatives, some of them, that had returned to El Salvador after living here for, in some cases, decades. We wanted to get their perspective about why they went back and what life was for them in the U.S. After El Salvador, we spent a few days in San Bernardino, California, documenting the first 7 years of my life. We took some shots of the high school that I attended and some shots of the sign of the community college that I got kicked out of. And we also got to spend a couple days in Tijuana, where I crossed the border. And coincidentally, we were there during the arrival of a caravan of refugees from Central America. We got to document the sad circumstances of many men, women, and children living in makeshift camps in the streets of Tijuana. Since our return, we have conducted a number of interviews with SOU DACA students, community leaders, and business owners that have direct connections with immigrant workers. We want to get their perspectives, and we have achieved that so far. We will be spending the next few weeks documenting my life in Southern Oregon, and soon after start editing. By the time we are done with the film, I estimate that we are going to have about 100 hours, which will be reduced to 60 to 80 minutes of film. Nicholas has a pretty serious task ahead of him for the next 3 or 4 months, but he's very capable and talented, so I'm sure it's going to be a nice product at the end. We hope to have the film completed by this summer. So now the initial purpose of the film, when we decided to embark on this project, was intended for social media and intended for internet distribution. As you can imagine, it has kind of taken a life of its own now. And now we will be submitting the film to independent film festivals for this fall and in 2020, including our very own Ashland Film Festival. We hope to get the attention of mainstream film distributors at festivals, but I believe that regardless of what happens with festivals or no festivals, we will have accomplished our goals. That said, I'm hoping the film will get national attention that results in positive dialogue, which I believe we need desperately today. Now, film aside, I want to clarify that personally I am not advocating for undocumented immigration, nor am I advocating against border security or immigration enforcement. I am, however, advocating for common sense legislation that addresses a problem that has mushroomed into an issue of race, division, and hate in our communities. I am an advocate for the eradication of undocumented employment, which exploits workers and keeps families in the shadows. I believe this can be accomplished with tough enforcement of E-Verify and in tandem with guest worker programs that meet the demands of our industries. I am advocating for the 11 million people who pay taxes, have no voice, have no vote, have no representation, are exploited, criminalized, dehumanized, persecuted, incarcerated, and locked up in cages. I would like to see an end to a system of exploitation that I compare to modern-day slavery. Ask yourselves, if this isn't a form of modern-day slavery, what is? My goal is to educate, raise awareness, and shed some light on facts and myths about undocumented immigrants with the hope of mobilizing citizens to demand common sense policies from our legislators. I want to see an end to luring desperate workers by a system of employment that not only puts lives at risk, but also separates families here and abroad. I would like to see an end to a highly politicized system, a political wedge that is dividing this country along racial lines. I will admit, the deeper I get into this issue, the more cynical I become. The more cynical I become about the prospects for meaningful solutions coming from our legislators. But I have faith in us. I have faith in us, the people. Unfortunately, I believe that both major parties want issues, not solutions. By the way, I hear that Senator Wyden is in town, and I would love to have this conversation with him, perhaps Senator Merkley or Congressman Walden. Perhaps some of you have access to those doors, and I would love to have a few minutes with our legislators. On that thought, I believe that oftentimes solutions come from the bottom up and not from the top to bottom. So it is for us, if we don't like what we see, to act and demand action. In conclusion, I would like to end with an analogy I often use to illustrate the current system, and I call it the honey jar. If you leave a jar of honey wide open on your kitchen table, it's likely to attract a caravan of ants. You can build a wall around the jar, and you can send an entire army to guard it. But as long as the jar remains open, the ants will find their way. Thank you.